Hi, everyone joining. Thank you for being with us. We're about to start an interesting conversation about a symbiosis of robots and humans and what is the future for robots and robotics. Joining me, a fascinating speaker from the UK. He's the cybernetic pioneer who is upgrading the human body, starting with himself. He became the world's first human, cyborg, in a set of groundbreaking experiments. He's the professor at Coventry and Reading Universities, and his research areas are artificial intelligence, robotics, biomedical engineering. Joining me from the UK, Professor Kevin Warwick.
Hi, hello, nice to meet you.
Welcome. Professor Warwick, you have actually startled the world when you became the guinea pig in your own research and implanted and tested a technological implant by connecting it to your central nervous system. And that actually earned you a title of Captain Cyborg. Please tell us about the project, describe as the experiments and what were the main findings?
Yes, well, it was looking at the possibility partly for therapy. So I was working with a number of surgeons, and for them it was of interest how to implant what was then the brain gate. This was 100 electrodes, and they were actually fired into the nervous system in my left arm, and connecting my nervous system to the computer and then onto the internet. Partly we wanted to see, could we overcome, for example, pain for somebody who has pain in the different extremities of the body? Could you, by electronic means rather than chemical means, overcome that pain? But for me, the more interesting parts were looking at extending the body. What extra things could we do? For example, one example was looking at different senses. We have a limited number of human senses, so by plugging into the nervous system, could I extend that? Which I did do. I experimented with ultrasonics, which is like a bat sensing the world. So what was happening, I was wearing ultrasonic sensors on a baseball cap and had a blindfold on, and essentially when signals came into the ultrasonic sensors, as something came close to me or I went close to something, my brain was receiving pulses of current that increased in frequency. So the closer the object, bing, 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 these pulses came in, the further away the object, so the pulses were further away. And my brain very quickly adapted to it. And that was one part of the experiment, just to show how our brains could take on new senses.
Professor Warwick, you have been fascinated by an idea of a half human and half robot, and you have worked extensively with the biological brain and a technological or mechanical robot. Why are you fascinated by that research area, and what potentially its application may be, perhaps in healthcare, especially in the light of the pandemic?
Well, yeah, big application areas, but one other project you mentioned there was the biological brain. I've got a little robot here. I'll switch it on, whether you can see the little robot. There we go, nice little robot with its wheels moving around. And what we did with that little robot was to take brain cells, first of all from rat brain cells, and put them in a little dish to grow them, culture them, keeping them in an incubator. So these were living brain cells. And then we put them in the robot body. So we had the technological body, but with a biological brain. And we were looking as the robot moved around, sensing the edge of the corral it was in, the little walled area. So we were looking at how it learned how to move around. But how it learned meant how the brain cells were connecting up. And clearly there was a whole range of things, partly for therapy, or for somebody, a patient perhaps with Alzheimer's disease where part of the brain is not working. Could we put fresh neurons into our little, into the little brain we were dealing with, fresh neurons, so that it would learn things anew, with the possibility of doing the same things with humans ultimately. So partly it was for therapeutic purposes, but partly for enhancement, is looking at, okay, humans are okay as we are, but can we do extra things? Can we, in this case, apply new brain cells that we can help us learn anyway more? But with the Cyborg project, can we increase the senses? Can we change the way we are as humans?
Just on that, humans have limited capacity, and the way we sense the world is quite restricted. We understand and perceive the world in 3 dimensions only. Do you think, going to what you just said, can the technology enhance our capacity or the capacity of human body? And to what extent?
Yeah, I hope so, because we are very limited, as you say, in a lot of the things we do. One example is how we communicate, how I'm communicating with you now, which is essentially my brain has all sorts of ideas and colors and images and thoughts and feelings, emotions, and so on. And if I want to communicate with you, I change all those complex signals into this trivial coded sound wave, pressure wave, which almost bears no relation on the thoughts that I have initially. So wouldn't it be much, much better if we could communicate directly, brain to brain? And as part of the experiment I did, my wife had electrodes pushed into her nervous system, and we did the basics. We communicated in a very telegraphic, very basic way, nervous system to nervous system. So when she closed her hand, my brain received a pulse. So tick, 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 lots of, if you can think of telegraphy and the Morse code, that was how we were communicating, just to show that you could communicate nervous system to nervous system, so that ultimately when we go brain to brain, we can communicate in a much better way. And one of the things that we have an advantage is what our brain cells do is communicate. That's what they do. A brain cell takes signals from another brain cell and it communicates to other brain cells. They like to communicate. They will do more things. And we see that with social media. You can see people go, oh, yeah, because we've got a new way of communicating. Our brain cells want to do it. And so if we give our brains the opportunity to communicate brain to brain by thinking, essentially, thought communication, which we don't understand at the moment because we can't do it, but in the future we will be able to communicate in that way, a much richer form in terms of ideas and thoughts and images and colors, then we will have a much, much richer form of communication, is one example of how we will be able to upgrade how humans are. And that was part of what we're trying to do, the basics of that with the Cyborg experiment.
Professor Warwick, I'll be very sad if I get to live to that day when we stop communicating through speech and language. That'd be a sad day for me.
I don't know that we would necessarily stop doing that, but it would be in our arsenal, our possible things we could do. So what you'd be gaining is a much richer form of communication. So, and you may have to, if there are some people that are not upgraded, somebody who doesn't have a technological implant, you might still have to communicate with them in terms of speech in the old-fashioned form. So you might, keep it. You might need to use it on a rainy day.
Professor Warwick, with much research happening in artificial intelligence and development of artificial intelligence, lots of research focuses on increasing the autonomy of robots or artificial intelligence. To what extent can we actually increase that autonomy to allow artificial intelligence to make its own decisions? And how far away are we from that in research?
Well, I think it's happening now, particularly in the military domain, and with autonomous vehicles, we're giving artificial intelligence choices. But it's simple choices, where the choices are limited. Let's say with an autonomous vehicle, if it's on the motorway, which lane does it drive in? There's a lot of issues, ethical issues that arise with that, but we're limiting the choices. I think when we open up more choices, more possibilities, which we can do, of course, because AI has lots of opportunities. It's opening up things that we can use it for. Then we can give it a lot more choices. and it can do a lot more things for us. And I think we will ultimately defer more to artificial intelligence for it to do things for us. However, when it is making the choices, and if it is AI, the I is intelligence, that's what it means. It's intelligent, making decisions, choices based on what it has learned, not on what we have programmed it with, then potentially it can get very dangerous. It can make choices, decisions that we don't want it to. For example, a military machine can decide to shoot this person, not that, or it can decide to shoot you, not the other person. So, which I presume is not what you want. So it could be very dangerous, but if we let it go too far.
Well, a robot-controlled world seems like a dire situation for the humankind. But what is the alternative way? I mean, if there's much research happening in the world, and we get to a point when artificial intelligence is more powerful than of humans, what is the alternative way when humans are still in control?
It's a very good point. The alternative way is, rather than have it acting against us, to join with it. And this is the whole idea of the cyborg. The cyborg is a cybernetic organism, ultimately partly human, partly AI, partly technology. So rather than having the artificial intelligence acting against you, you merge with it through a simple implant form, so that your intelligence is then part biological, what you have initially, and part technological, what you gain through the AI. Then potentially you can have the best of both worlds, and your AI part can be networked in with lots of other people. So it's a shared intelligence, which allows you to communicate and do all sorts of other things. So my hope is that's the way we'll go. Rather than acting against us, the AI will be merged with us. We will become one with it, which is, I feel, is the way we're heading, really.
So you're talking about not only solely developing robots, but upgrading humans.
Oh, very much so. But the research has two sides to it. One is therapy, helping people with disabilities. One of the areas of research I'm involved with is deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's disease and people that have clinical depression and so on, which is electrodes deep in the brain, applying pulses which counteract the effect, allowing them to overcome the problem. So there's therapeutic sides to it, but at the same time, exactly the same technology allows us to look at enhancing all humans, to give us particularly mental abilities that we don't have at the present time.
Well, in the light of that, I'll have to ask you this question. And we are in a pandemic, and you, I'm sure, may have heard of the conspiracy theories around it. And one of them being that it is actually, it is a planned event in which Bill Gates is trying to chip the humankind. And it actually brought up, the fears of humans of any device implanted into their bodies or into human body. What would you say to that?
Well, there's two sides to it. I mean, I find it amazing when I see people communicating together, not wearing masks, even though governments are saying you must stay distances apart, you must be careful how you're interacting with other people, and still they don't. I mean, I see it in England. I'm looking at students in university, for example, all interacting together and partying, and the government has said, no, you shouldn't do that. I think if we had chips implanted, then potentially the chip could tell you, no, you can't do that. So there is the possibility, which is a positive and a negative. There is the possibility of political, governmental control of what you're doing directly to your brain. Simply, you can't think, I want to do something different. You wouldn't think that because it's directly controlling your brain, which is a good point. If we could do that, we probably wouldn't have coronavirus now because we'd have all followed what we're supposed to do. And after 2 weeks, it would have been overridden. But I can see people's worries that why should we have such control over our brains in particular, or our bodies generally? We don't want that. We want to fight against it. So it's a mixed response. I think it can be a good thing. I mean, for other examples of that would be if I want to lose a bit of weight, if I want to slim, then it's very difficult because my part of my brain says, no, I don't want to eat that chocolate. And another part of my brain says, oh, that chocolate would be really lovely. So I don't get as slim as I would like to. Whereas if I had a chip in my brain, you could call this a slim plant rather than an implant, then the chip would say, no, you can't eat that. It would just stop me eating the chocolate. So I'd be able to program in, right, stop me actually thinking this way or wanting to do things like that. I wouldn't even think about chocolate because I know I wouldn't be able to have it. So it has positive sides to it, but there's a sinister negative side. However, I feel how we always go with technology, if the positive aspects of it, particularly in terms of communication, are something that we want to do, then we will go for it. And if the negative sides are overriding, we won't.
Professor Warwick, how do you see the future in the next 50 years? I mean, if we're trying to substitute human activity with robots, will we be at the point in development or in evolution when humans are not needed anymore to do any of the jobs or creative process?
Well, jobs, I think, yes. I mean, but I think what has happened, even with just computing, never mind with artificial intelligence, is how we define jobs. That has changed. If you go back 30 or even 50 years, a lot of people were doing physical activities that now are taken over by machines. I can remember when I was a young child, there were still people mining in very dangerous areas for coal and so on. And they were being replaced by machinery. And I was thinking, well, that's a good thing because it's a very dangerous thing for people and it's not a nice environment. Why should humans be doing that? But at first they were fighting against it. Oh, this is a terrible thing for the government to bring in. We don't want the technology. Whereas I think let's do it. So any physical jobs, why not get technology, robots, if you like, to do things for us? But what we call a job has now changed because a lot of people now involved with computers, with software, those jobs didn't exist 30, 40. We didn't have the sort of computers that we have now at all. In some place, we didn't have computers at all. So I think how we define jobs and work will change over time. So I don't think jobs will disappear and we're all going to be lying on beaches and not doing anything. And what are we going to do? What are we going to do with our lives? I simply think the things will shift and what we call a job will be much less physical than it is now, by and large.
Mm-hmm. Professor Warwick, most of your experiments you've done on yourself were to the detriment of your own health. Where do you get the drive, the motivation, and the persistence to be doing these things and to experiment on your own body?
Oh, I think there's the beauty of science and technology like this, that you can do experiments like that. I wanted to find out with the Cyborg experiment, with the communication with my wife, what's that like? And it's difficult to describe it because I know what it feels like. It was there and it was absolutely fantastic, I have to say. And just that one moment in terms of experimentation, when my wife's nervous system was hooked up to my nervous system, and although I couldn't see her, I knew she was sending me signals by closing her hand. It was like a eureka moment. Wow, this actually works. Look at that, fantastic. I mean, I then found it difficult to describe to people what had actually happened and what it means and will mean in the future. But having that excitement out of science where you can actually achieve something that's never been done before. And this area with humans and technology together is enormous. There's lots more. If any children are thinking, should I get into this area? Should I go into business? No, you're not going to get an interesting life with the business and things like get into technology, science. There's so much research that needs to be done. And it involves you experimenting with the technology to achieve things that nobody's done before. It's such an exciting area.
Well, it does sound exciting. Professor Warwick, there are many students watching us right now from 120 universities and 35 different countries. What is your message to the students or your future fellow scientists as a scientist?
Well, I mean, I've spoken to students from lots of different countries, and I think country boundaries, political boundaries, really disappear when it comes to science and technology. But there's a lot of challenges out there. Some of them one regards as science fiction now, and some things were science fiction 20, 30 years ago. So I think potential research scientists, technologists, engineers, it is exciting because there is so much there that can be done. If you feel, well, why don't we do this? Well, make it happen. That people will say, you can't do this, it's not possible, or they'll find some business or insurance reason why you can't do it. Don't listen to them, stick in with it, and make sure you can get it done. Even something like time travel. If you think it's possible, you can work out a way to do it, then make it happen. But please, could I come with you? And I'd love to go forwards in time, I have to say. So if anybody is managing to do that, put my name down for one of the first trips.
Professor Warwick, I think we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was a fascinating, a very interesting conversation. It was an absolute honor. I hope you have a great day despite the weather.
Thank you. The sun will be out soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.